Hey, welcome back. In this video, we're going to get your machine completely ready for this course. This video is only for Windows users, so if you're on Mac or Linux, please only watch the corresponding setup video for your operating system here in this section. So we're going to install some applications. We're going to also see some of the applications that we have already installed that we're going to use in the course. We're going to see how to use them. And well, as you've noticed, this video is pretty long, but you don't really have to watch all of it. Most of the students I know are not going to watch the whole video. And to ease up this process for you, I just put together this chaptering right here. You can also see at the bottom left side of the screen the current chapter that we're in, and also this line that indicates how much of the section we're done with. So you can now easily switch between different sections and only find those sections that you need. You can also download this table of contents from the resource section of this video. Here you can just take a look at this and see if something you've gotten installed, feel free to skip it, please. If you've got Postman installed, please skip the Postman section. If you have experience in front-end development, you know all about browsers, don't watch the browser section. But if you see something here, if you see a keyword or a phrase that's not really familiar to you, please watch that section. You don't have to watch the video if you are a pro Windows user, and you can just go ahead and download and install each one of them yourself and also get yourself familiar with them. In that case, you don't have to watch the video at all. You can just download the chapters and take care of each one of them yourself. Right, so maybe pause the video, take a look at this for a few seconds, and figure out which ones you need to watch or not. Now, in the last three sections, we're not installing anything. For example, section 8, Task Manager, we're not going to install it. It's a pre-installed application on all Windows machines. We're just going to open it up and get ourselves familiar with the environment. Same for the Programmer's Calculator, and also in the last section, we're just going to create a simple node application and just make sure that everything is working as expected. So if you don't care about that, if you know that everything is working fine, you can just skip that and go and follow along with the course, and you don't have to watch that, okay? So all of these sections are skippable. If you feel like you don't have to watch them, you're right, you don't have to. I also want to point out that please don't bookmark anything in this video or add a note. If you do, it will probably be gone in a few months because I plan to keep this video as updated as possible, so I will probably have to re-record some of the sections and re-upload the video, and I have to do this every few months. And every time I re-upload this video, all the Udemy notes and bookmarks will be gone. So please keep that in mind and don't bookmark or add a note to this video whatsoever. Alright, now let's get started with setting up our Windows machine. I am right here on a freshly installed Windows 11. I just installed this Windows. I didn't install any other application on it. I just removed some of the icons from the dock to just remove some of the distractions, and that's pretty much it. And let's get started with talking about the terminal. So obviously for this course, we're going to need to use a terminal. We will be using a terminal a lot. And the one that I recommend that you use on Windows is the terminal application. So if you just click on this start icon and you just go into your all apps, and here you can search for terminal. So I'm just going to open this up. You've also got two more options on Windows. One is called PowerShell, just simply PowerShell. So let me just show that to you as well. So if I search for PowerShell, here's the other one. And you've also got the other one, which is called command line. Okay, actually command prompt. So the one that I suggest that you use is the terminal application because, well, it has more power. You can easily create new tabs, which will come in handy a lot in the course, and it's just better in a lot of ways compared to the command. Here it's also prompting me to set this as our default terminal application. I recommend doing this as well. So you can just come here and start up. Here in the default terminal application, you can just select Windows Terminal, click on Save, and then close this. Okay, so now we've got our terminal application. To zoom in, you just have to press Control and then plus sign and then Control and minus sign. And if you want to create a new tab, you can either click on this plus icon, and the shortcut for that is Control-Shift-T. So you can just press this and create new tabs. Now in this video, I'm not going to teach you the command line. It's going to be a video of its own. If you don't know anything about the command prompt, if all the experience that you have so far with the command prompt is that you just opened it up, you threw a few commands in to install something, and then you closed it, please watch my video about introduction to command line that's following the setup videos. It's going to help you a lot because we will be using the terminal throughout this course, okay? Now I'm just going to talk about one simple command right now, and that is called systeminfo. And if you run this, it's going to tell you your CPU architecture and your Windows build. You're going to need this later on for installing the other applications that we're going to install in this video. So if you scroll up right here, you can see that I am on Windows 11 Pro. This is my build version. And if I scroll down a little bit here in the processors, you can see that I am on ARM v8. So this is my CPU architecture, or ARM64. It has different names, or ARC64. In your case, you are maybe on this one or on something else. So please just take note of your processor, because you're going to have to choose it later on for installing the later applications. And I also recommend that you right click on the terminal application and you just pin it to your taskbar, because we're going to be using the terminal a lot and it's good to have it handy. Now, if you don't have access to this terminal application, chances are that you are on an old Windows version and you don't have access to this terminal. If you don't have it, you can just stick with PowerShell or command prompt, or maybe just go ahead and install a terminal application from the internet, but we're not going to talk about that. This new terminal application is pretty great. I really like Windows 11. It's way easier for development. It used to be a nightmare for me to code on Windows, but now with this Windows 11, things are just miles easier. We've got this new terminal application. We've got an ability in Task Manager to search for processes and so much more. So if we can upgrade or update your Windows to the latest version of Windows 11, that's perfect. If you can't, well, it's still fine, but you're not going to have access to some of these fancy features. Okay, so that's it about the terminal, and now let's go ahead and talk about a browser. The default browser application that comes with Windows is Microsoft Edge, so you can either use this throughout the course or you can install Google Chrome. We're going to be using a browser from time to time to pull up some documentations, or later on in the HTTP section when we are going to create HTTP applications and web applications, we will be using a browser to test them. We will be using the network tab to take a look at our request and see what exactly happened. Alright, so feel free to stick with the Microsoft Edge. It's totally fine. You can just right click on the screen, click on Inspect, and once you do that, here you can go into the network tab. And it's really similar to Google Chrome, so you could just use this one, or you can use Google Chrome, or any other browsers for that matter, maybe Firefox or anything else that you prefer. As long as they have the network tab, that's all that we care about. Now let's go ahead and just install Google Chrome. So I'm just going to search for install Google Chrome. All right, I'm going to go into this first result in the Google official website. And I'm just going to click on download Chrome. All right, once it's downloaded, I'm going to click on open file. Now here we get this prompt. Here I'm going to say yes. All right, now it's downloading Google Chrome. It's going to take a few seconds, so let's wait for this to finish. All right, perfect. So now we have Google Chrome installed. So I'm just going to double click on it and open it. It was a pretty straightforward process. You just have to download it, click on open file, and then just click on yes and all the prompts, and that's it. So let's go ahead and open the application. And here we are. If you want, you can set this application to be your default one. This is what I always do. So here I'm just going to scroll down to find the Google Chrome browser. I'm going to click on it, and right here I'm just going to click on set default. Okay, and that's it. Now I'm going to close the setting. So again, we can just right click, click on inspect. Now the shortcut for this is Control-Shift-I. So you can hit Control-Shift-I to hide or to show the developer tools. Now the one tab that we're going to be using a lot in the HTTP section is the network tab. So I'm just going to go there. I'm also going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm also going to move it down in the bottom. So I'm going to click on these few dots and just click on this one to have the tab right here at the bottom. And here, if I just do a quick Google search for Node.js, here you can see all the requests and responses that were exchanged for this particular refresh that we did. And you can click on each one of them and see exactly what happens in that particular request, and also see the response that we got for that request. You can also right click right here to see some more data if you want. For example, if you want to see the HTTP version that was used, you can just here click on the protocol, and you can also see the protocol through which that request was sent. Either HTTP version 3, version 2, or version 1, or anything else. You can see that here in the protocol. All right, so that's it about us talking about a browser. All right, now the next thing that we need to install is a code editor. The one that I'm going to be using throughout the course is Visual Studio Code, but feel free to go with anything that you want. If you already have a code editor and you're happy with it, it's perfectly fine. You don't have to install this. You can just skip this step. But if you want to use the same thing as I do, you can install Visual Studio Code. So if you already have an IDE, or if you're using maybe Brackets, Atom, again, it's totally fine. You can just stick with them. It does not matter whatsoever. But I'm going to show you the code editor that I'm going to be using in the course, and that is Visual Studio Code. So I'm just going to search for install Visual Studio Code, not Visual Studio, that's a different application, Visual Studio Code. All right, right here, I'm going to go into this website, code.visualstudio.com. Now here I am on Windows, so I'm going to select this one. Now I'm going to download the user installer, and because I am on ARM64, I'm going to download this one. Again, in your case, chances are that you are probably on x64, so please select the other option. We've talked about in the terminal section how we can find out what is your CPU architecture, so please go there, find your CPU architecture, and download the one that is for your machine. Alright, now I'm going to just wait for this download to finish. It's going to take a few seconds. Alright, it's now done, so I'm just going to open it in my File Explorer. And right here, I'm just going to double click on it to start the installation process. Now here, let's accept the agreement. So I'm going to click on next. I'm just going to go with the default path to install the application. And let's just have an icon in our start menu. You can turn it off if you don't want it. So let's click on next. Now here we can just keep the default options, or if you want, you can create a desktop icon or add these options. I'm just going to go with the default one and click on next, and then click on install. Okay, now I'm going to wait for this to finish. Alright, it's now successfully installed. Let's now open it, and I'm going to also show you some of the configurations that I'm using in the application in case you're curious and you want to have the same things. And we're just going to talk about a few useful things in the application. So I'm just going to click on finish right here and launch the application. I'm going to close my File Explorer. I'm going to minimize Google Chrome, and let's also close Microsoft Edge. Alright, here's the application. I'm just going to talk about the theme that I'm using and just a few extensions, and that's pretty much it. So here in Visual Studio Code, I am using the Material UI theme throughout the course, and you can install it by here going into the Extensions tab, or you can press Ctrl-Shift-X to go to this tab. Now here I'm going to search for Material Theme. And now I'm going to install this one. It's just called Material Theme. It has around 2 million downloads, probably more by the time that you're watching this video. So let's install it. And let's also install one more thing. It's called Material Icon Theme. And with this, we can just get some nice icons in our File Explorer. I'm also going to install this one. And here in the prompt as the theme of the icon, I'm just going to select Material Icon Theme. Alright, with these two in place, now we've got our theme set up. Let's select a theme. To do that, all you have to do is to press Ctrl-K and then Ctrl-T. And this is going to pop up, and here you can see the list of all the themes that you have installed. Now, throughout the course, I'll be using a light theme, which is this one, because it works better on a video, but I know that a lot of you will stick with a dark theme, so feel free to do that if you want. You can maybe choose any of these dark themes that you have from Material UI, maybe this one. So let's just select this one. Now, a very useful thing that we have access to here in Visual Studio Code, and we're going to be using it a lot, is that you can access Visual Studio Code from the terminal, and you can open files and folders from the terminal in Visual Studio Code. So here, if I just go into my desktop, here I can just maybe create a new directory. I can say mkdir and then maybe test. And now we can open this folder up in Visual Studio Code. So we can just say code and then test. In that installation process, the code command should have been added to your path automatically. And one of those options that were checked by default, that's what it does. Now we have access to this code command, and we can use it to create files, to open files, or to just open folders in Visual Studio Code. So here I have that folder opened up. Here I'm going to click on yes, I trust the authors, and I'm going to just close the previous Visual Studio Code. And right here, let's just create a new file. I'm going to call it app.js. And here we can see that we get that nice icon for JavaScript files or any other file type that we have. We have an icon for each one of them. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit by hitting Control and then the plus key. And right here, let's also install one more tool that we're going to be using throughout the course. And this other one is Prettier. Using Prettier, we can automatically format our code. We can specify it in a way so that every time we save our file, Prettier is going to kick in and format our code. It's a great tool to use. If you're creating a production application, it's a great tool to use to ensure that you have consistency of style throughout all of your files. So let's go ahead and install this one as well. I'm going to hit Ctrl-Shift-X to go into the Extensions tab, and I'm just going to search for Prettier. Now here's the extension. I'm going to click on it. It's called Prettier Code Formatter. It has around 37 million downloads, and I'm going to click on Install. Now with this thing installed, I'm going to turn on something in my settings. So I'm going to hit Control and then comma to go into the settings of Visual Studio Code. And right here in the search bar, I'm going to search for Save. Now there's this option right here that says Format on Save. And I'm just going to go ahead and check this box. Again, what this means that is if you have a formatter available, which in our case we do, which is installed Prettier, every time you save, that formatter is going to kick in and it's going to format your code. Now you don't have to do this if you don't like it. You can just don't check that. And every time you want to format your code, you can go into your command plate. So let's say that I have a code right here. So let name equals Joe. And let's add a few spaces right here. Now what you could do is to open up the command plate by hitting Ctrl-Shift-P. And right here we can search for Format, and here Format Document With. You can just press that, you can choose Prettier, and it's going to kick in and format your code. And these spaces won't actually be removed because they're in a string, but yeah, that's what you can do. But right now, notice if I save, it's not going to kick in even though I have that option turned on right here. If you want to do that, you have to first do something. Again, you have to open up the command plate again, search for Format, and there's this option that's just simply Format Document. And I'm just going to click on it. And here it says Configure Default Formatter. So let's click on Configure and let's choose Prettier. Now every time we save our file, it's going to automatically kick in and format our code, which is pretty nice. Alright, I'm also going to show you a few things that I don't have in my code editor throughout the course. One is this activity bar. It's pretty useless, so you can just turn it off by going into View and then right here into Appearance, and then you can just unselect activity bar and then that is gone. You can just easily switch between your File Explorer and the Extension tab by just hitting Ctrl-Shift-X to go into Extension or Ctrl-Shift-E to go into the File Explorer. Or if you want to search, you can hit Ctrl-Shift-F to go into the Search tab. I'm going to go back to the File Explorer tab by hitting Ctrl-Shift-E again. And to show or hide this, you can just press Ctrl-B to hide it or Ctrl-B again to show it. So you can simply just toggle this menu by hitting Ctrl-B. Now we also don't have the minimap throughout the video. You can keep it if you want, but if you want to turn it off, you can just go into View and then Appearance. And then right here, you can just click on Minimap and that is now gone. Alrighty, so that's it about our code editor. Alright, now let's talk about how we can install Node.js on Windows. Now, for Mac and Linux guys, I really recommend it that they use NVM to install Node, because using NVM you can install multiple versions of Node, and that could come in handy a lot. For example, you might be working on a project, you might have actually other projects, and each one of them have their own Node version. It would be really great to be able to switch easily between them and be able to change your Node version easily with just one terminal command. Now, I would recommend the same thing on Windows, but unfortunately, NVM is not supported on Windows. NVM is only supported for Windows and Mac OS, although we have this other application, it's called MVM Windows. It's not exactly NVM, but it's really like NVM. Here's the GitHub repository. You can go right here. It's being created by this guy. And well, it works good. I just installed it and it really is similar to NVM on Mac and Linux. You can just here read the documentation. It again works really similar. You get pretty much the exact same commands, although some of them are different. But I would recommend to use this one if you can. You can just install this, and this is how we can easily switch your Node version. You can just say nvm use, specify your Node version, and then you're going to switch to that. So you could do this if you want. I would recommend that you also install NVM Windows. For Windows, it's just called NVM Windows. and it's pretty straightforward to install it. Just go to this GitHub repository, then click on Downloads Now. Now right here, if you scroll down a little bit here in the assets, just download the exe file and then just double click on it and then just follow along with the prompt, and that's it. You have NVM installed. And then you can go into your terminal. Again, you also have to restart your terminal. And once you are done with the installation process, you should be able to just say nvm-v and get a version back. And then you can say nvm install. You can find the latest version of Node.js by going into the nodejs.org website. And here we can see that we have two different versions. One is LTS and one is current. Now for production, please always stick with the LTS version. It stands for long-term support. So if you go with this, your application will be supported for years to come. And only go with current if you just want to experiment. If you want to maybe try the new features of Node, go with current. But for production, go with LTS. In this course, we will always stick with the LTS version of Node, whether version 20 or 18 or any other LTS versions. So we always stick with LTS throughout the course. Now, there's a video after the setup videos. It's called Learning NVM and different Node versions. There, we're going to talk all about different Node versions, and you're going to understand what they mean and, well, just get a better sense about Node versioning. All right, so here we can just find the latest version of LTS. Just go back and just say that. So NVM install version 20.9.0. And after this, you should have Node and NPM installed on your machine. And then once you've done that, you can just say nvm use and then 20.9.0. And after that, you will have access to the node and npm command. So you should be able to just say node-v. Now, the reason that I didn't install NVM Windows is because as of now, NVM Windows does not support ARM64 architecture. So I am on an ARC64 CPU architecture. You probably are not. I know that the majority of you are on x64 architecture, so you can just go ahead with this process, download it, and then use NVM Windows for this course. So again, if you're on x64, please feel free to download the exe, and then right here in the terminal, just run these few commands and install Node.js. And then you can skip the rest of the step. But for those of you who are on ARM64, please stick around because I want to show you how to install Node. Well, you could still use NVM Windows, but if you do that, NVM Windows is going to install the Node version that is for x64 architecture. So you're going to run Node on an emulation. Now what that does, well, it works fine, but the problem is that it's gonna run slow because now there's a layer on top of your CPU that runs Node, and it's just gonna slow things down a little bit. It's always best to install things natively, so just the binary, the native binary that is built specifically for your CPU architecture. That's the fastest way of running an application. So the way that we can do this is to just go into the nodejs.org website. Here we can go into the download section, and right here we can just download the Windows installer for ARM64. Now if you're still here and if you're not on ARM64, you can still also install Node using this way. You could download the 32-bit or the 64-bit depending upon your CPU architecture. Please refer to the terminal section of this video where I talked about how you can find out what is your CPU architecture, and then you can just follow with these steps and install Node.js. And later on, maybe if you want to upgrade to your Node version, you can just re-download this and then it's going to help you to update it, or you can uninstall Node and then download this again. So that's how we can do it. It's a pretty straightforward process. Well, not as easy as NVM, but still, it's a good way to install Node for as long as we see that we're going to get support for NVM Windows on ARM64. And actually, there are also other applications like NVM for Windows, but I'm not going to talk about it. If you are curious, you can just go ahead, Google it, and learn how to do it yourself. But for our purpose and for this course, this will work just fine. So I just downloaded the ARM64 version of Node. So I'm just going to open it up in my File Explorer, and I'm just going to double click on it to start the installation process. All right, here I'm going to click on Next. Here I'm going to accept the agreements. I'm going to click on Next again. I'm just going to go with the default path. And then here I'm just going to click on Next. Now here, if you want, you can install this to add support for native C++ modules. Later on in the course, if we want to do something like that, we will install it. For now though, we don't really need to, so I'm just going to click on next because it's going to take a while to install. Let's just go with the default Node. Now here, I'm just going to click on next, and now I'm going to wait for this to finish. Alright, and that's it. Just like that, now we have Node and NPM installed. So I'm just going to click on finish. And now if I open up my terminal, well, I have to restart my terminal. So I'm just going to close my terminal and I'm going to open it up again. And now I'm able to run node-v and then get the version of my Node application. I can also run npm-v and get the version of my npm that has just been installed. Now later on, if a new version comes out, you can just download this installer again. And if I try to open up that installer again, I have an option to remove this Node.js application. So I can maybe remove it and install it again. You can also uninstall the Node.js application by just right-clicking on the start icon and go into installed apps. And here you should be able to find the Node application, which is right here. And you can just click on uninstall. So we can uninstall it and then install the new version. Or if later on and then Windows starts to support Windows on ARM64, you can just again uninstall Node and then go with that. So we've got that option as well. For now though, we've got the Node application and totally installed, and it's gonna work fine for this course, so we're not gonna care too much about it. Okay, so that's it about installing Node.js. Alright, the next tool that we need to install for this course is Postman. We're going to be using Postman a lot in the HTTP section, and using Postman we can test the HTTP applications that we're going to create. So to install Postman, I'm going to open up my browser and I'm just going to search for install Postman or download Postman, it doesn't matter. And I'm just going to go into the official website, which is postman.com, and then /downloads. And right here, we're going to see this big button, and I'm just going to click on it and download it. Now, this is only for x64-bit CPU architecture, so I'm on ARM64. Well, it will work fine on an emulator. It's not going to be as fast as natively running it, but for our purposes, it will work just fine. Okay, so I'm just going to wait for the download to finish. And now here in the File Explorer, I'm just going to double click on it to start the prompt for installing the application. Alright, so that's it. Postman should now be installed. It's a fairly simple process. You just download this, double click. You don't even have to click on anything else again. It's an automatic process, and now we should have Postman right here on our desktop. So I'm just going to double click on it and open it up to make sure that it's being installed successfully. Alright, and here it is. Here we can just put in a URL or an IP address, and then we can specify our methods and anything else that we can specify in an HTTP request. We can just click on send, and then we're going to see our response right here at the bottom. So again, using this application, we can test all of our HTTP applications that we're going to create later on in the course. It's a great tool to use if you are creating HTTP applications. You can pretty much test anything using this, and well, it's something that you have to have in your developer toolbox if you are creating a backend HTTP application. Alright, so that's it about installing Postman. Alright, next up, let's go ahead and install another important tool that we're going to use, and that is Wireshark. Using Wireshark, we can monitor our network card. We can see exactly every single 0 and 1 that travel across our network card. So we can see exactly what happens. We can now debug our network applications much better. We can get a better sense about how networking works, about how our network applications are working, what is really going on there. So it's a great tool to install. I use Wireshark a lot, and it's going to help you a lot to get a better sense about networking in general. So let's go ahead and install this tool. Again, in the browser, I'm going to search for downloads Wireshark. And right here, I'm going to go to the official website, which is wireshark.org. I'm just going to click on it. And right here, we can just download the installer file. So if you're on x64, you can just download this and then just follow along with the prompts. It should be pretty straightforward, and then you have Wireshark installed. Now, right now, Wireshark does not support Windows on ARM CPU architecture. It supports it on Linux and on macOS, but just not on Windows. They said that they're going to support it on version 4.2 if they could, so we're hoping for that. But there's also the beta version that you can install that is a native build for ARM CPU architecture, for Windows with ARM CPU architecture. So let's go ahead and download that. Again, if you're on x64, please just download this installer. If you're not, just scroll down a little bit here and live on the bleeding edge. Just go into the automated build section. And right here, click on Windows 64. And then here you can just download the latest ARM64.exe file. Now this is the beta version, but it will work just fine for our purposes. Now if on the previous page you see an option for downloading ARM64 version for Windows, please just download that. Chances are that if you're watching this, they have already pushed out that version, so you can just go with that. But if it's not available, you can just come to this page and download the beta version. So it's now being downloaded, and once done, I'm going to open it up in my downloads folder, and I'm just going to double click on it. Now the setup should be similar whether you downloaded the x64 version or ARM64 version. So I'm just going to click on yes here, and now here in the prompt, I'm going to click on next. I'm going to click on noted, and then next again. And just all the default options. Let's just create something on our desktop as well. So I'm just going to check that box. It's up to you. I'm going to click on next. I'm going to go with the default installation path. And we also need to install npcap. Without this, we can't capture our packets. So this has to be checked. So I'm going to click on next. Now we don't need this. You might need to install this if you are maybe getting access to your network by a USB port. So if you're getting your internet from a USB thing, feel free to check this, but in my case, I'm not, so I'm just going to click on install and do not check this option. All right, and now I'm going to wait for this to finish. Now it's going to give me another prompt for installing npcap, so I'm also going to go with this and agree to these terms. Now I'm going to click on install. I'm not going to check any of these options. And I'm also going to wait for this thing to finish. All right, looks like npcap was done, so I'm just going to click on next, and then I'm going to click on finish. And let's now wait for Wireshark to finish its final things. All right, now Wireshark has also been installed successfully, so I'm just going to click on next and then finish, and that's it. So we should have Wireshark right now. I'm just going to double click on it and open it and make sure that it works fine. Here I can see the list of the interfaces that I have available. I'm just going to click on my Ethernet. I'm going to double click on it. And once you do that, here you can see the list of all the packets that were exchanged through that interface. So if I just go ahead and do a quick Google search, so if I just search for something gibberish, and now here, if we go back to Wireshark, we're going to see a whole lot of packets. All of these things happened as a result of that search. I'm just going to click on this little red icon to stop capturing the data. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, I have two options turned off throughout the course. One is the highlighting option. I don't want to see our packets highlighted. It could confuse us. You could keep it turned on or not. It's really a personal preference, but I'm just going to turn it off. I'm also going to turn off this thing because I don't want my screen to scroll down automatically as new packets come in. So these two, I'm just going to turn these two off. Again, if you want, you can keep them, but for this course, I'm not going to have these options turned on. So here you can see exactly what happens in your network card. You can click on each one of them. You can see exactly all the zeros and ones that were exchanged. So it's a really great tool for networking engineers and for people who are working with the networks, such as backend developers. It's going to come in handy a lot. I use it a lot in my career, and hopefully you would from now on. We're going to start using this tool a lot from the networking section. I know that none of these right now make sense to you. You're seeing a whole bunch of things that's just basically gibberish to you probably, but these will start to make a lot more sense to you once you start the networking section. Okay, so that's it about installing Wireshark. I'm just going to click on close and click on quit without saving. Now at this point we are done installing stuff on our machine. There are just two more tools that I need to show you how to use them, because we're going to use them throughout the course. Again, you don't have to install anything right now. These are just the default applications on your Windows machine. Now let's start with the Task Manager application. So if you just right click on your taskbar and you can just click on Task Manager. Now using this application, you can see the list of all the processes that are opened in your operating system, and you can see exactly how much of your hardware these processes are using. So here for each process, you can see how much CPU it's using, how much memory it's using, how much disk usage, and also how much network. So you can get a lot of insights about what's going on in your operating system, and also for a specific process. We're going to use this tool to monitor our node applications to see our memory usage, or maybe later on to see our network usage and our CPU usage, and just sometimes see what exactly is happening in that process. So here you can see the list of all the processes. Here you can go into performance. Here you can see your whole CPU utilization and your memory usage. In this case, I have 4 GB of RAM, and out of this, 2.5 of this 4 gig is now filled. Here I can also see all of my CPU cores. I have 4 CPU cores, and this is my speed. This is how many processes I have opened up, which is 134. The number of threads that are opened, and pretty much all the other data that you need to know about your hardware. Now to see our node process, here we can go into the details. It's basically the same thing as processes, but now more detailed version of them. So here you can see again the list of all the processes that you have opened up. And if we just go into our terminal and run node, so if we say node or specify a file to start maybe an HTTP server, or if we just simply say node to go into the REPL, what we're doing is that we're opening a new process in our operating system, and this process is called node. So if I just search for node right here, we're going to see that process appeared right here. Now here we can see how much CPU it's using. In this case it's 0 because it's not using any CPU. We're not doing anything in that process. And here you can also see how much memory this process is using. And you can also see the architecture. In this case it's ARM64. If you're on x64, for you it's going to be x64. Now here's where it could be problematic. If you're on ARM64 and if you install the x64, you're going to see that appearing right here. If that's the case, if you are on ARM64 and you install the x64 version, you're going to see that version right here. Well, again, it will work fine, but it's going to be kind of slow because now you're running an emulation on top of that. So it will not be as fast as running it natively. Okay, so that's it about the Task Manager. Again, you can open it up by just right-clicking on your dock and then click on Task Manager, or you can go into the list of your applications and search for Task Manager. Alright, the next tool that we need to be familiar with is a programmer calculator. So let's go ahead and see how that works. So I'm going to go into the start menu, and here I'm just going to search for calculator. So let's just open up the default calculator app that we have on our Windows machine. So here, if you open it up, by default the mode is standard, but the one that we're going to be using throughout the course is the programmer mode. So all you have to do to switch it to a programmer mode is to just click on these 3 bars right here to open up the navigation and just switch it to programmer mode. Now I know that we haven't talked about the numeric systems right now. We don't have any idea about what is a binary number, what is a hexadecimal number or octal number or a binary. We have no idea about them. But basically think of this programmer calculator as something that you can use to convert numbers back and forth between different numeric systems, so between different bases, which means that if you have a number that is hexadecimal, again, I know you have no idea about what that is, but just think of this as a number, and that number that you have, you can convert it into zeros and ones or into decimal. So basically all these different numeric systems that are used in computers. So if I just put in one decimal number, let's say 5, here I can see the binary for that number, which is 0, 1, and then 0, 1. Here I can see the hexadecimal equivalent of that number and the octal equivalent. So if I put something else, maybe this number, here again you can see the zeros and ones. Here you can see that number converted into hexadecimal. Here you can see that number converted into octal. So all you need to know is to know that you can just put a number like this, and then you can convert that into these other things. You can also put a hexadecimal if you want, so you can just select hex right here, and you can put a hexadecimal number, and then you can see its equivalent in decimal or octal or binary. You can also just put straight binary data if you want. So you can just press 001 and then put a number that is binary. Okay, so this is all that you're going to need to know. We're going to get familiar with all these things that we have right now in the understanding buffer section. And there we're going to understand binary numbers, hexadecimal numbers, octal numbers, and all these different things that we need to know about raw binary data and dealing with zeros and ones. All right, so that's it about the other tool that we need to use throughout this course. All right, now at this point, we should now have our computer completely ready for this course. So let's just create one simple Node application and test it and make sure that everything is working as expected. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to open up the terminal, and now I'm going to navigate to desktop. And right here, I'm going to create a new file using the new item command. So I'm going to say new item and then text.txt. And now I'm going to open this up in my Visual Studio Code using the code command. So I'm going to say code text.txt. And after I type a little bit of it, I'm just going to hit the tab key on my keyboard to let the terminal to automatically complete the command. And I'm just going to hit enter. All right, right here in this text.txt file, I'm just going to say that this text is coming from Node. And I'm going to save this. And now I'm going to close my Visual Studio Code. And well, what we're trying to do is that we're trying to create a simple Node application, a very simple one. And in that application, we're just going to read the contents of this file and then send it somewhere. Okay. Now, we're not really going to understand this application that we're going to write. It's just a testing application. You can just copy the code as I type it. Well, you're not going to understand it, but you could do that. And if you don't like it, you can just download the code from the resource section of this video and just copy paste the code and run it using Node and just make sure that it works fine. Okay, so with this in place, I'm going to create another file. So I'm going to say new-item. And in this other file that we need, we're going to write some Node.js code. So I'm going to say new item app.js, and I'm going to hit enter. Now I've got another file right here on my desktop called app.js, and I'm going to open this up in my code editor as well. So I'm going to say code and then app.js. I'm going to hit enter. And right here, I'm going to write some Node code. Again, feel free to do whatever I'm doing here. Just type the code that I'm going to type. And if you don't like it, I totally get it because you're not going to understand it really. You can just download the code and just copy paste the code. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to start an HTTP server. And if someone sends a request to that server, I'm going to grab the contents of that file that we just created and send it back to the client as a response. If that doesn't make any sense to you, don't worry about it. So let's just do this. So I want to say const HTTP equals require and then node HTTP. Using this node module, we can create HTTP servers, we can send HTTP requests, HTTP responses, and receive HTTP requests. Now with this in place, I'm also going to include another module, the FS module. Using this module, we can deal with files in our operating system. So I'm going to say node and then FS. All right, with these two in place, I'm going to create the server. So I'm going to say const server equals http.create server. Using this method that we have available on the HTTP object, we can create HTTP servers. But to get access to the request, we have to first start to listen on the request event. So I have to say server.on request. And then here we're going to have a callback function that's going to run every time someone sends a request to our Node application. So request and response. And right here, we're going to read the content of the file and then send it back to the client as a response. Before I do it though, let's also go ahead and start listening on a specific port and an IP address. So here I can say server.listen. I'm going to specify a port 4080. And then I'm also going to start it on my loop back interface. So I'm going to say 127.0.0.1. And then the callback function right here. And here I'm just going to log something and say server has started on, and I'm going to log server.address. Using this method, we can grab the IP address and the port that the server is listening on. All right, with this in place, let's now go ahead and read the contents of the file. So I'm just going to say const result equals fs.read file sync. Here I have to specify a path. I'm going to specify the path of that file, which is text.txt. Now here, this result just contains the zeros and ones that are in that file. So this result is the data of that file, and I'm just going to send it back to the client. Before I do that, I'm just going to set the response header, the content type header, to just indicate to the client that we are about to send you plain text. So here I can say response.set header, and the header name is content-type. And for the second parameter, I'm just going to say text/plain. Again, this means that what we are about to send you, client, it's not JSON, it's not JavaScript, it's not HTML, it is just plain text. And with this in place, we can go ahead and send these zeros and ones to the client. For that, we can just say response.end and then results. So I'm just going to save this. Now I'm going to go back to my terminal and I'm going to run this application. So we can run a Node application by just running the Node command and then specifying a file for it. So here I can say node and then app.js. And here if I just hit enter, here I can see this message that says server has started on this IP address and on this port. Again, I do realize that none of this probably make any sense to you as of now. You have no idea what is this request object, probably what is this response object, what exactly is this fs, what exactly this method does, what exactly is this syntax, and so much more. This header, if I want to talk all about this, it's going to take a long time. So this is not going to make a ton amount of sense, but it's totally okay. Just copy paste this code and just put it there. Let's see that if we send a request to it, we're going to grab the content of that file. And also let's capture the packets using Wireshark and just make sure that everything is working fine. So I'm going to first maybe open up a Postman and also Wireshark. Alright, here in Postman, I'm just going to specify my IP address, which is 127.0.0.1, and then colon, the port that we chose was 4080, so I'm going to specify that here as well. And before I send this request, let's start to listen on our loopback interface and try to capture those traffics. I just double clicked on it. Here I have this panel, and now I'm going to click on send here in Postman. And here I got this response back. I'm going to go back to Wireshark and I'm going to stop capturing for more packets. Alright, here we go. Let's first take a look at Postman and see what happened. Here in Postman, as a response, we see that it says this text is coming from Node. Now this means that we successfully read the contents of that file using that app.js file using Node.js, and we sent it back to the client, and I can see it right here at the bottom. So we just moved some amount of data through our network card. And this Wireshark application here also captured those packets. So it captured every single 0 and 1 that traveled through that path to get back to the client. Okay, and here if you click on this one, you have to find the one that has the protocol as HTTP and source as 127.0.0.1. Again, I know that this right now is just gibberish to you, because we haven't talked about IP addresses, we haven't talked about the protocols, we haven't really talked about anything here. But you can just try to click on some of these packets, especially the ones that have this HTTP name in them, and right here see if you see that text as well. So here I can see that says this is the text coming from Node, and this is the exact zeros and ones that were exchanged. Okay, so if you can see this in your Wireshark application, it's great. If you can't, it's probably there somewhere, but because it's so confusing to you right now, you have a hard time finding it. It's totally okay, don't worry about it. You can just skip this. As long as you see the message here in Postman, that's all that there is to it. Okay, you are now completely ready. In Wireshark, you just should be able to see some packets. Don't sweat it. If you can't find that exact packet that's for HTTP and contains that message, if you can, great. If you can't, again, don't worry about it too much. Just close Wireshark and move on. We're going to learn a lot more about this, and everything here will make sense to us after we're done with the networking section. Okay, so for now, this is just some gibberish to you probably right now, so just close Wireshark. If you can get it, again, great. If not, doesn't matter. So I'm going to close Wireshark. So if you can see this message here in Postman, congratulations. That means that your computer is completely ready for this course. And you can just follow along with me and do everything that I do throughout the course. Alright, that's it about setup, and I'll see you in the next video.